A millionaire stressed with his work is startled when suddenly a little 6-year-old beggar girl enters his office and with innocent eyes hands him a handwritten resume and pleads, "Sir, give me a job, I need money." He starts laughing, thinking it's a prank, and sends the girl away. But for some reason he doesn't understand. He decides to read the child's resume. What each line of that paper reveals makes the millionaire unable to bear what he reads, and tears begin to fall from his face. What he does in the next moments leaves everyone shocked. The silence of the 30th floor was broken only by the barely perceptible hum of the air conditioning and the distant roar of traffic from below. Robert Sinclair adjusted his reading glasses and turned his attention back to the report spread across the polished mahogany desk. The numbers were impeccable as always. Each spreadsheet reflected his obsession with efficiency. Each graph demonstrated his ruthless ability to turn opportunities into profit. At 52, Robert had built a financial empire that many envied, but few understood the price he had paid for it. His corner office on the top floor of the city's most imposing corporate tower was a fortress of glass and steel, isolating him from a world he considered chaotic and unpredictable. The walls were adorned with business awards and photographs of handshakes with important personalities, but no personal images broke the professional chill of the environment. He checked the Swiss watch on his wrist. 4:30 p.m. His schedule was clear until the 6 o'clock meeting with Japanese investors. Enough time to review the contracts for the real estate project that would yield millions over the next 2 years. Robert opened the Italian leather briefcase and began to examine each clause with the meticulousness that had made him feared in the business world. It was then that the office door opened. Robert didn't even look up at first, assuming it was his secretary with some urgent document. But the silence that followed made him frown. Margaret always announced her presence with a discreet, "Excuse me, Mr. Sinclair." This silence had something different about it, something that finally made him raise his eyes from the papers. A small girl was standing in the doorway. For a moment, Robert was completely still, convinced he was seeing things. The child couldn't have been more than 6 years old, with messy brown hair held back by a worn-out hair tie. Her clothes were simple and visibly used, but clean, as if someone had taken special care to ensure she presented herself as best as possible. On her small feet, shoes that looked far too big for her. But it was what she held in her hands that most caught Robert's attention. A crumpled piece of paper, folded and refolded so many times that the crease marks were as deep as scars. The girl held it with both hands, as if it were the most precious object in the world. "Mister," she said, her clear voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Please give me a job, I need money." Robert blinked several times, certain he was hallucinating from overwork. But the girl was still there, holding out the crumpled paper towards him with a determination that contrasted brutally with her age and size. "How did you get in here?" he finally managed to ask, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. "Through the door," she replied with disconcerting simplicity, taking a few steps forward. "This is my resume. I work hard, I swear." The word "resume," spoken by that tiny, childish voice, sounded so absurd that Robert almost laughed. Almost. But there was something in the seriousness with which she spoke, in the firmness of her posture despite her visible nervousness, that prevented him from treating the situation as a joke. "Listen here, little girl," he began, his irritation growing as he processed the absurdity of the situation. "This is an office, not a playground. Where are your parents? How did you get past security?" But the child didn't back down. Instead, she took another step forward and placed the crumpled paper on the mahogany desk right next to the multi-million-dollar reports. "Please, mister," she repeated, her brown eyes shining with an intensity Robert couldn't comprehend. "I really need this job." And at that moment, something in Robert Sinclair's chest stirred. Something he had buried so deeply he had almost forgotten its existence. Robert stared at the girl for long seconds, his business mind trying to process the situation. Corporate pranks weren't uncommon in his world, but this was too elaborate, too specific. No competitor would be cruel enough to use a child this way. Or would they? "Is this a joke?" he asked, his voice laden with suspicion. "Did someone send you here?" The girl shook her head vigorously, making her messy hair dance around her small face. "No, mister, I came alone. I need to work to help my mom." The sincerity in her voice was unsettling. Robert had spent decades learning to identify lies and manipulations in the business world, but he couldn't detect any sign of falsehood in that child. That bothered him more than it should. He leaned back in his executive chair, creating more distance between them. The crumpled paper remained on his desk like an intruder among the organized documents. "How old are you?" he asked, trying to buy time while deciding whether to call security immediately. "6, she answered promptly, "but I'm strong and smart. I know how to do lots of things." Robert felt a pang of something he couldn't name. 6 years old, the same age Emily had been when... He cut off the thought abruptly. No, he wouldn't allow his mind to go down that path. Not again. "Children don't work," he said, his voice hardening, unpurposefully. "They have to study and play. Where is your mother now?" The girl's eyes filled with tears that she stubbornly refused to let fall. "She's sick. She can't work properly. And I stopped going to school a long time ago." The confession was like a punch to Robert's gut. A 6-year-old child who had stopped going to school. The concept was so wrong, so distorted from everything a childhood should be, that he felt his anger rise. Not at the girl, but at the situation, at the world that allowed this to happen. "And you think you can work here?" he asked, gesturing to the sophisticated environment around them. "This is a multinational corporation, not a..." He stopped, realizing he was being cruel to a child who was clearly already facing unimaginable hardships. The girl nodded with renewed determination. "I can clean, I can organize papers, I can stay quiet in a corner. I won't bother anyone, I promise." Robert looked again at the paper on his desk. Curiosity, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time regarding anything that didn't involve profit, began to grow within him. "This Résumé," he said, pronouncing the word carefully. "Who helped you make it?" "Ms. Anne from the Haven helped me write the harder letters," the girl replied proudly, "but I told her everything I know how to do." Haven. The word echoed in Robert's mind. This child lived in a shelter, without a proper family, without resources, without the basic opportunities every child should have. And yet, there she was, 6 years old, trying to solve the problem herself. Against his better judgment, Robert reached out and picked up the paper. It was warm, as if it had been held tightly for a long time. The folds were deep, indicating it had been opened and closed many times, perhaps while the girl practiced what she was going to say. "What's your name?" he asked, still holding the paper without opening it. "Sophia," she replied, a small smile lighting up her face for the first time. "Sophia Diaz." "Sophia," Robert repeated, and the name felt strange on his lips. It had been so long since he had spoken to a child, so long since he had seen such a genuine smile. "And your mother? What's her name?" "Maria. Maria Diaz. She's the nicest person in the world, but she's very sick and the medicine is very expensive." The simplicity with which Sophia described her situation was heartbreaking. There was no self-pity, just facts presented with the brutal honesty only children possess. Robert glanced at the clock again. 5 p.m. was approaching, and he had a decision to make. Should he call security and send the girl away, returning to his safe, predictable routine? Or should he open that crumpled paper and find out what a 6-year-old considered professional qualifications? His hand trembled slightly as he began to unfold the resume. The paper unfolded with a dry rustle, revealing a stained and yellowed page, clearly torn from a school notebook. At the top, written in large, uneven letters in blue pen, read, "Sophia's Résumé." The spelling error didn't diminish the seriousness with which it had been prepared. Robert adjusted his glasses and began to read, his expression gradually changing from skepticism to something far more complex. Name, Sophia Diaz. Age, 6, where I live, Mrs. Carmen's Haven. Things I can do. I can handle being cold without complaining. I can clean floors on my knees. I don't complain when I'm hungry. I know how to take care of sick people. I can carry heavy things. I stay quiet when I need to. I know how to share food with others. I can sleep anywhere. I don't cry when someone yells. I know how to comfort someone when they're sad. The list continued with 10 more items, each more devastating than the last. They weren't professional qualifications in the traditional sense, but rather survival skills that no 6-year-old should ever need to develop. Robert felt something strange happen in his chest, a growing pressure, as if something were expanding inside him, pressing against his ribs. His hands began to tremble imperceptibly as he continued reading. Why I need to work. My mom is very sick and there's no money for medicine. She cries at night when she thinks I'm sleeping. I want to help her get better. I promise I'll work hard and won't cause any trouble for anyone. The handwriting changed at the end, becoming more rushed, as if Sophia was in a hurry to finish before someone stopped her from writing her deepest feelings. Please give me a chance. I am a good girl. Robert had to stop reading. His vision was blurring, and he realized with a shock that his eyes were filling with tears. Tears. He hadn't cried in over 5 years, since Emily's funeral. He had convinced himself he no longer had that capacity, that emotions were a weakness he had overcome. But there he was, a man who moved millions of dollars without blinking, being torn apart by a handwritten resume full of spelling errors. "Mister?" Sophia's small voice brought him back to the present. "Are you crying?" Robert quickly wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, trying to regain his composure. "No," he lied, his voice coming out hoarser than usual. "Just allergies." Sophia didn't seem convinced, but she didn't press him. Instead, she took a step closer to the desk. "Did you read everything? Did I forget anything important?" Robert looked at her, really saw her for the first time. Saw the determination in her brown eyes, the way she kept her shoulders straight despite being so small, the way her small hands clasped nervously as she awaited his answer. "Sophia," he began, then stopped, not knowing how to continue, how to explain to a 6-year-old that the world didn't work this way, that companies didn't hire children, that there were laws, regulations, protocols. "I need to think about this," he said finally, refolding the paper with excessive care. Sophia's eyes lit up with hope. "Does that mean maybe yes?" Robert felt his heart clench again. That hope on her face was so pure, so confident, that he couldn't bring himself to destroy it immediately. "It means I need to analyze your proposal properly," he replied, using corporate language as a shield against the emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Sophia smiled then, a smile so radiant it lit up the entire somber office. "Thank you, mister. I'll wait for you to decide. Can I come back tomorrow to find out the answer?" Before Robert could respond, Sophia was already running towards the door, her oversized shoes clattering on the marble floor. "Sophia!" he called. but she had already gone, leaving only the echo of her footsteps in the hallway. Robert was left, alone in his office, holding a handwritten resume that had changed something fundamental within him. For the first time in years, the numbers on the spreadsheets on his desk seemed completely irrelevant. He looked out the panoramic window at the city below, where thousands of people lived their lives, faced their problems, fought their battles. How many Sophias were out there? How many children carried responsibilities that shouldn't be theirs? And more importantly, what would he do with this information now that he could no longer pretend he didn't know? The meeting with the Japanese investors was a disaster. Robert, normally ruthless in negotiations, found himself distracted several times, his mind drifting to a 6-year-old girl and her impossible qualifications. When Mr. Tanaka asked about quarterly projections, Robert had to ask him to repeat the question twice. After the investors left, visibly displeased, Robert remained in his office long after normal hours. Sophia's resume was tucked away in the top drawer of his desk, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. Each handwritten line echoed in his mind, like a hammer against his carefully constructed conscience. I can handle being cold without complaining. What kind of life did a 6-year-old need to have to develop that skill? At 9 p.m., he finally decided to leave, but instead of taking the executive elevator directly to the underground garage, as he had done every night for 15 years, Robert went down to the ground floor. He needed to understand how Sophia had managed to bypass security. "Good evening. Mr. Sinclair," greeted Marcus, the night security chief. "Leaving a bit late tonight?" "Marcus," Robert said, "I need to know how a child managed to get to my office this afternoon. A girl, about 6 years old." The burly man frowned, checking his notes. "A child, sir? We have no record of any child entering the building today. Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Robert replied, his irritation growing. "She was in my office for at least 15 minutes. Marcus called in the afternoon shift guards, and after 20 minutes of investigation, the truth emerged. During the shift change at 3:30 p.m., there had been a small commotion when a courier arrived with urgent documents precisely when the camera system was being rebooted for weekly maintenance. "It was a window of about 3 minutes, explained Bobby, the afternoon shift guard. "But I swear I didn't see any child, Mr. Sinclair." "She must have observed our routine," Marcus murmured, impressed despite himself. "For a child to know exactly when to act, that requires planning." Robert felt a shiver run down his spine. Sophia hadn't simply stumbled into his office. She had studied, planned, waited for the right moment. A 6-year-old child had executed a plan that many adults would consider too complex. "I want security reports from every day this week," he ordered. "Check the external cameras too. If she's been watching the building, there must be records." The next day, Robert arrived at the office an hour earlier than usual. He hadn't slept well, waking up several times thinking of Sophia's hopeful smile and her promise to return for his answer. Margaret, his secretary, noticed immediately that something was different. "Mr. Sinclair, shall I bring your coffee now, or would you prefer to wait?" "Margaret," he said abruptly, "do you have children?" The question caught her by surprise. In 12 years working for him, Robert had never shown interest in her personal life. "I do, sir." "Two? Why do you ask?" If a 6-year-old child were forced to work to help her family, would that be normal? Margaret stared at her boss with growing concern. Robert Sinclair, discussing child labor, didn't fit the cold, calculating man she knew. "Sir, that would be terrible. Children that age should be in school, playing, being protected by adults, not taking on responsibilities that aren't theirs. And if this child lived in a shelter with a sick mother, there are social programs, charitable organizations, support systems for situations like that. Margaret replied, her voice gentle. No child should have to carry that burden alone. Robert nodded slowly, processing the information. He spent the rest of the morning trying to focus on work, but his thoughts kept being interrupted by visions of Sophia. At 11 o'clock, Marcus brought the security reports he had requested. The external cameras showed a small figure observing the building from different angles for 3 consecutive days. Sophia had indeed studied the building's routine, identifying patterns, waiting for the perfect opportunity. She's persistent, I'll give her that, Marcus commented, pointing to an image where Sophia was sitting on a bench in the park across the street, clearly watching the comings and goings. 3 days in a row, always around the same time. Robert looked at the images with a mixture of admiration and sadness. A 6-year-old child shouldn't need to demonstrate this level of desperate determination. Mr. Sinclair, Margaret said from the doorway, there's someone here to see you. No appointment, but she insists it's important. Robert looked up and his heart quickened. Could it be Sophia, returning as she had promised? Who is it? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. A woman. She says her name is Maria Diaz and that she needs to speak urgently about her daughter. Robert's world stopped. Sophia's mother was here, and he had a feeling his life was about to change irrevocably. Maria Diaz was a woman who had once been beautiful, but who now carried the visible weight of battles no one should have to face alone. Her brown hair, the same color as Sophia's, was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes, though clean and well-kept, showed signs of prolonged wear. But it was her eyes that impressed Robert the most, eyes that shone with a mixture of maternal determination and profound exhaustion. Mr. Sinclair, she said, her voice firm despite her visible nervousness. I apologize for bothering you, but I need to talk about my daughter Sophia. Robert gestured for her to sit in the chair opposite his desk, noticing how she moved carefully, as if each movement was calculated not to aggravate some pain. Please, have a seat. Would you like some water or coffee? No, thank you, Maria replied, perching on the edge of the chair as if ready to bolt at any moment. I came here because I found out Sophia came yesterday to make you a proposal. Robert observed the woman before him, trying to reconcile the image of the desperate mother Sophia had described with the dignified, articulate person seated in his office. She told me about the Résumé, Robert said carefully. She's a very determined little girl. Maria's eyes filled with tears that she quickly tried to hide. Mr. Sinclair, I didn't know she had done that. If I had known, I would have stopped her. Sophia is just a child. She shouldn't be looking for work. I came here to apologize and to assure you this won't happen again. How did she know to make a resume? Robert asked, his genuine curiosity evident in his voice. Maria sighed deeply, as if gathering strength for a painful confession. Last week, she asked a man on the street how to get money to help someone sick. He laughed at her and said she needed a resume to get a job. Sophia took it seriously and asked Miss Anne at the Haven to help her write it. The cruel simplicity of the situation hit Robert like a blow. An adult had mocked a child's genuine concern, and Sophia had turned that mockery into concrete action. Maria, he said gently, Sophia told me you're sick. Is it serious? The woman hesitated, clearly debating internally how much she should reveal to a stranger. I have a condition that requires expensive medication. I work when I can, as a cleaner, but lately... She paused, her hands trembling slightly. Sophia shouldn't be worried about this, she's just a child. Where are you living now? At Mrs. Carmen's Haven. It's temporary, just until I can save enough money to rent a place of our own again. Robert felt a pang of something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine compassion mixed with an inexplicable urge to act. "Maria, may I ask a personal question?" "Sophia's father hasn't been in our lives for 3 years," she replied quickly, closing off that topic. "It's just the two of us now." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Robert could see Maria struggling with pride and desperation, trying to maintain her dignity while facing impossible circumstances. "Mr. Sinclair," she said finally, "I also came here to ask that if Sophia comes back, please explain to her that children don't work, that she should focus on being a child while she can. I will find a solution to our problems." The dignity in Maria's voice, even in the face of adversity, touched something deep in Robert's heart. Here was a mother trying to protect her daughter's innocence while fighting alone against crushing forces. "And if there was a way to help?" he asked softly. "Without compromising your dignity?" Maria looked at him with suspicion. "Sir, with all due respect, men like you live in a very different world from ours. I don't know what your intentions are, but I can't afford to trust promises that may not be kept. Sophia has suffered too many disappointments." Maria's frankness was like a slap in the face to Robert. She was right. He lived in a bubble of privilege, insulated from the realities people like her faced daily. "Were you working before you got sick?" he asked, changing tack. "I was a nurse. I worked at St. Luke's Hospital for 8 years before my condition worsened." St. Luke's Hospital. The name hit Robert like a thunderbolt. It was the same hospital where Emily had been treated. Could it be? "What period?" he asked, his voice tighter than he intended. "From 2015 to 2023. "Why do you ask?" Robert felt the world spin around him. Maria had worked at the hospital during the exact period Emily had been a patient. The silence in the office became almost suffocating. Robert stared at Maria with an intensity that made her shift uncomfortably in her chair. 2015 to 2023. Emily had died in 2018 after 2 years of treatment at St. Luke's Hospital. "Mr. Sinclair?" Maria asked, concerned by the sudden pallor that washed over his face. "Are you all right?" Robert had to lean on the desk to keep his balance. The memories he had buried so deeply began to emerge like furious ghosts. Emily in the hospital corridors, small and frail in the white bed, the kind nurses who cared for her with such affection. Do you remember a little girl named Emily Sinclair?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. Maria's eyes widened with recognition and surprise. She brought her hand to her mouth as if trying to hold back words that were about to escape. "Emily," she murmured. "The girl from pediatric oncology. Blonde hair, blue eyes. She loved to draw butterflies." Robert felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. His legs trembled, and he had to sit down heavily in his executive chair. "She was your daughter," Maria said, not as a question, but as a confirmation of a painful truth. "I remember you now, always in the hallway, always on the phone, always working," Robert completed bitterly, "always thinking that if I closed one more deal, if I made 1 more million, I could somehow buy her more time." The tears Robert had held back for years finally began to fall. There he was, the man who intimidated boards of directors and made CEOs tremble, crying in front of a woman he barely knew. "Mr. Sinclair," Maria said gently, her voice filled with a deep compassion that came from the experience of one who knew pain. "I remember Emily talking about her daddy. She said you worked to make enough money to get her healthy again." "And I couldn't," Robert said, his voice broken. "I spent millions on experimental treatments, on the best doctors in the world, and I couldn't save her. She knew you loved." Maria replied softly. "Children know these things, even when adults have a hard time showing it." Robert looked up at Maria, truly seeing her for the first time. no longer as the desperate mother of an intrusive child, but as someone who had witnessed the worst moments of his life, someone who had cared for his daughter when he was too busy trying to save her in other ways. "You took care of her," he said, not as a question, but as a recognition. "I worked the night shift," Maria confirmed. "Emily had trouble sleeping, so I would sit with her, tell her stories, help her with her drawings. She was a special little girl." "She was," Robert agreed, his voice barely audible. "She would be Sophia's age now." The parallel struck them both like a bolt of lightning. One child lost, another child in danger, a nurse who had cared for the first, now desperately needing care for the second. "This isn't a coincidence," Robert murmured. "Sophia coming to me, you having cared for Emily. This can't just be a coincidence." Maria stared at her hands for a long moment before replying. "Mr. Sinclair, I don't believe in coincidences when it comes to children needing help. But I also can't accept charity based on guilt or painful memories." "It's not charity," Robert said, his voice gaining strength for the first time in the conversation. It's recognition. You cared for Emily when I didn't know how. Let me care for Sophia now." "Care for her how?" Maria asked, her natural suspicion battling the hope that was beginning to dawn in her eyes. Robert stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. How many Emilys were fighting in hospitals right now? How many Sophias were taking on responsibilities that shouldn't be theirs? "First, we'll address your medical situation," he said, turning to face her. "What medications do you need? What treatment?" "Mr. Sinclair." "Then we'll make sure Sophia goes back to school. A 6-year-old shouldn't be thinking about working." "Please stop," Maria said, standing up as well. I can't just accept this." "Why not?" "Because when people like you get tired of helping people like us, the consequences are devastating. Sophia has already lost so much. I can't let her get attached to hopes that might disappear." Maria's brutal honesty hit Robert hard. She was right. He lived in a world where impulsive decisions could be undone without real consequences for him. But for them, every dashed hope was a deep wound. "And if I guarantee that won't happen?" he asked. "How?" Maria challenged. "How can a man like you guarantee something like that to people like us?" Robert realized he was at a point of no return. His next decision would define not only Sophia and Maria's future, but also his own redemption. Robert walked to his desk and opened the drawer where he kept personal documents. From inside, he removed a small silver frame that had remained hidden for years. A photo of Emily smiling in a hospital bed, holding a drawing of colorful butterflies. His hands trembled slightly as he showed it to Maria. "This was the last picture I took of her," he said, his voice heavy with restrained emotion. 3 days before she passed. She had drawn these butterflies because she said they represented transformation. That one day she would transform into something free and beautiful. Maria looked at the photo, and her tears finally fell. She remembered that day, that drawing, that conversation about butterflies. "She told me she wanted to give that drawing to her daddy, but that he was always too busy," Maria murmured. "I told her that parents sometimes show love in different ways, even when they can't be present." Robert closed his eyes, the pain of loss mingling with the guilt he had carried for years. "I was busy trying to save her the only way I knew, with money, with connections, with power, but I forgot to simply be present. I forgot to be a father." He put the photo back in the drawer and picked up his cell phone, dialing a number he knew by heart. "Dr. Hamilton, Robert Sinclair. I need you to see a patient for me." "No, it's not for me. It's for someone very important." "Would this afternoon be possible?" "Excellent." Maria watched, torn between hope and fear. "Mr. Sinclair, I can't afford a private consultation with Dr. Hamilton. He's one of the most expensive doctors in the city." "You're not paying for anything," Robert replied, already dialing another number. Margaret, I need you to cancel all my appointments for today. I have something more important to do. For the first time in 15 years of working together, Margaret was speechless. Robert Sinclair cancelling meetings for something more important than business was like seeing the sun rise in the west. Sir, are you sure? The board meeting? It will have to wait, Robert interrupted. Some matters are more urgent than quarterly profits. He hung up and turned to Maria, who was watching him with a mixture of disbelief and caution. Maria, I'm going to make you a proposal. Not charity, not pity, but a fair agreement between two adults who want what's best for Sophia. What kind of agreement? Robert took a deep breath, knowing his next decision would change everything. My company will hire you as a consultant for social responsibility. You understand the needs of vulnerable families better than any corporate report. Your salary will cover your medical treatments and give Sophia the education she deserves. Mr. Sinclair, I'm not finished, he continued, his voice gaining the firmness of big business, but with a warmth that hadn't been there before. Furthermore, we're going to create an assistance program for families in similar situations to yours. You will coordinate this program. Maria was silent for long seconds, processing the offer. Why would you do this? She finally asked. Because Emily taught me. Something it took me 5 years to understand, Robert replied, his voice laden with a painful truth. Money is only worth something when it's used to create something meaningful. And because Sophia had the courage to do something, I never did. What? She asked for help when she needed it. I never knew how to do that. At that moment, the office door opened and a small figure appeared in the entrance. Sophia was there, in the same simple dress as the day before, but her eyes shone with expectation. Mister, she exclaimed, running towards the desk, I came to see if you decided about my resume. She stopped abruptly upon seeing her mother, her eyes widening with surprise and a little fear. Mom, what are you doing here? Robert looked at them both, mother and daughter reunited in his office, two people who had suffered more than they should have, but who maintained a dignity and love he had lost years ago. Sophia, he said, kneeling to her level, I have a different proposal for you. Different how? She asked, tilting her head curiously. Instead of you working for me, how about I work for you? Sophia frowned, confused. I don't understand, mister. Robert smiled, and for the first time in years, it was a genuine, warm smile. I'm going to work to make sure you have everything a 6-year-old girl should have. A good school, a healthy mom, a safe home, and time to be a kid. Sophia's eyes filled with tears of joy. Really, mister? Is Mom going to get better? Robert looked at Maria, who nodded slowly, finally allowing herself to believe. Really, Sophia, but in return, you have to promise me one thing. What? That you'll study hard, play a lot, and never worry about adult things again. Can you do that for me? Sophia jumped into his arms, hugging him tightly. I promise, mister. I promise. And in that hug, Robert Sinclair found something he thought he had lost forever, a purpose that went far beyond money. A week later, Robert found himself in completely unfamiliar territory, Mrs. Carmen's haven. The place was clean and organized, but the signs of scarce resources were evident in every corner. Walls that needed painting, furniture mended with duct tape, few and worn-out toys from many children's use. Mr. Sinclair, said Mrs. Carmen, a robust woman in her 60s with kind but tired eyes, I never thought I'd have a businessman like you visiting our humble shelter. Robert watched the children playing in the small courtyard, their laughter echoing between the peeling walls. Sophia was among them, more animated than he had ever seen her, telling her little friends about her special mister who was going to help her mommy get better. Mrs. Carmen, How many families like Maria and Sophia's pass through here annually? Many, sir, more than we'd like to admit. Single mothers who lose their jobs due to illness, families evicted for not being able to pay rent, children who are orphaned. They are heartbreaking stories. Robert made mental notes of everything he saw. Every observed need turned into an idea for the program he was developing with Maria. "And what else is lacking here?" he asked. "Time," Mrs. Carmen replied, without hesitation. "Time to give individual attention to each child, time to listen to their worries, time to teach them basic things that parents should teach but can't because they're struggling to survive." At that moment, Sophia ran up to them, her eyes shining with happiness. "Mr. Robert, Mrs. Carmen said I can show you my room." The room Sophia shared with 3 other girls was Spartan, but she showed it with pride. Her bed was the bottom bunk, and beside it, carefully stored in a shoebox, were her treasures, a few drawings, a worn-out stuffed animal, and a picture of her with her mother. "This is my bear, Chocolate," she said, showing the mended toy. "And this is my favorite picture with Mommy from her last birthday." Robert took the photo, observing Maria smiling despite her evident fragility. Even sick, she had made a point to celebrate, to create a good memory for her daughter. "Sophia, soon you two will have a home of your own," Robert said, "with your own room, full of new books and toys." "Really?" she asked, barely containing her excitement. "Really? But while that doesn't happen, how about we make some improvements here for all the children?" In the following days, Robert immersed himself in a world completely different from what he knew. Instead of financial spreadsheets, he studied social reports. Instead of meetings in luxurious rooms, he visited public schools and health clinics. Margaret barely recognized her boss, who now came to the office talking about educational programs and healthcare assistance. "Mr. Sinclair," she said one morning, "you have a call from the board of directors. They're concerned about your new priorities." Robert sighed. He knew this conversation would come eventually. "Schedule a meeting for this afternoon, Margaret." It's time they understood that this company is about more than just generating profits. The board meeting was tense. 5 men in impeccable suits looked at Robert as if he had lost his mind. "Robert," said James Morrison, the oldest board member, "we understand your desire to contribute socially, but dedicating corporate resources to such a personal project raises questions about your leadership capabilities." "Questions like?" Robert asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Like whether your decisions are being influenced by emotions rather than business logic," Morrison replied. "The shareholders are nervous." Robert stood up and walked to the window, observing the city below. How many Marias were working beyond their strength? How many Sophias were taking on adult responsibilities? "Gentlemen," he said, turning to face the board, "in the last 5 years, our company has profited $2 billion. Do you know how many families we could lift out of poverty with a fraction of that amount?" "Robert, this isn't—" "Let me finish," he interrupted. "For years, we built this company based on the idea that success is measured only in numbers. But I recently discovered that there's a type of wealth that doesn't appear on balance sheets." He looked at each of the skeptical faces around the table. "The social responsibility program isn't a whim. It's an investment in the future. Educated children become productive adults. Stable families generate prosperous communities, and companies that invest in their community build loyalty and respect that cannot be bought." "And if this goes wrong?" asked another board member. "If the costs outweigh the benefits?" Robert smiled, remembering Sophia's hug and the relief in Maria's eyes. "Then we will have failed at something worth trying, instead of succeeding at something that doesn't matter." That night, Robert visited Maria in the small apartment he had rented for her and Sophia while the medical treatments were underway. It was simple but clean and cozy, a real home. "How was the appointment today?" he asked. "Better than I. Expected, Maria replied, a genuine smile lighting up her face. Dr. Hamilton said that with the proper treatment, I can go back to work normally in a few months. Sophia came running from the kitchen, wearing an apron that was huge on her. Mr. Robert, I'm helping Mommy make dinner. Can I invite you to eat with us? Robert looked around the small but love-filled apartment, so different from his empty mansion, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the genuine desire to belong to a family. Dinner at Maria's was a revelation for Robert. Sitting at the small kitchen table, eating a simple meal prepared with love, he experienced something his 20-room mansion had never provided, the genuine warmth of a home. Sophia chatted about her new school, her eyes shining as she spoke of the friends she was making and the lessons she was learning. Mr. Robert, she said, swinging her legs in her chair, today I learned that butterflies come from caterpillars. They stay in a chrysalis and then come out completely different, just like Mommy, who's getting stronger every day. The innocent parallel made Robert smile, remembering Emily's drawings. Butterflies seemed to be a recurring theme in his life, symbols of transformation he was finally learning to embrace. And you, Sophia, he asked, are you transforming too? I think so, she replied thoughtfully. Before I was worried all the time. Now I can be a kid again. The girl's words touched something deep in Robert's heart. A 6-year-old shouldn't have to go back to being a child. She should always have had that right. After dinner, while Sophia drew in the living room, Robert and Maria talked on the small apartment balcony. How are you feeling about all this? He asked. Scared, Maria admitted honestly. Happy, but scared. It's hard to believe good things can last when you've spent so much time expecting bad things to happen. I understand that feeling, Robert said. After Emily died, I thought I could never allow myself to care for someone again. And now? Robert looked through the window, watching Sophia concentrating on her drawing. Now I realize that caring for people is the only thing that really matters. The next morning, Robert arrived at the office to find Margaret visibly worried. Mr. Sinclair, you need to see this, she said, handing him a newspaper. The headline made him freeze. Business tycoon loses his way. Robert Sinclair, spending millions on questionable projects. The article, clearly fed by leaks from his own board, painted a picture of a man who had lost control after an inexplicable obsession with a family of... The article used a vague term, but implied they were not established citizens. Worse still, it suggested his business decisions were being compromised by emotional instability. Before he could fully process the betrayal, his phone rang. It was Richard Chen, his partner of 15 years. Robert, we need to talk, urgently. An hour later, Richard was in his office, but the coldness in his eyes was unmistakable. You saw the paper, Richard said. It wasn't a question. I did, and I presume you contributed to this investigative report. Richard didn't deny it. Robert, you're putting our company at risk. Investors are nervous, clients are asking questions. Your involvement with this family is affecting our credibility. My involvement is helping people who need it and destroying our reputation in the process, Richard exploded. You can't just decide we're going to become a charitable organization without consulting the other partners. Robert stood up, walking to the window. Below, the city pulsed with life, millions of people living their stories, facing their battles. How many Mariahs were working beyond their strength? How many Sophias carried burdens they shouldn't carry? Richard, in 15 years of partnership, have you ever seen me make a bad business decision? No, but then trust me now. This program isn't charity. It's social investment with a guaranteed return. What kind of return? Robert turned to face his partner. The kind that doesn't show up on spreadsheets, but builds lasting legacies. Richard shook his head, frustrated. "You've changed, Robert, and I'm not sure it's for the better." "You're right," Robert agreed. "I have changed. I've discovered there's more to life than accumulating money. And if the other investors don't agree with your new philosophy?" The question hung in the air like a veiled threat. Robert knew exactly what Richard was insinuating: a vote of no confidence, an attempt to remove him from the leadership of the company he had built. "Then we'll have an interesting conversation at the next board meeting," Robert replied calmly. After Richard left, Robert was alone with his thoughts. For the first time in his career, he faced the real possibility of losing control of the company he had built. The irony wasn't lost on him. Just when he had finally found a true purpose for his wealth, it was being threatened. His phone rang. It was Maria. "Robert, I saw the paper. Are you okay?" The genuine concern in her voice touched him deeply. When was the last time someone had cared about his well-being, not his money or power? "I'm facing some challenges," he admitted. "Because of us?" Robert closed his eyes. It would be easy to lie, to say no. But Maria deserved honesty. "Partially. But don't feel guilty about it. This is a fight I need to face. And if you lose, then I'll lose fighting for something I believe in." That night, Robert didn't go home. Instead, he drove to Maria and Sophia's apartment. He found them in the living room, Sophia doing homework, while Maria prepared materials for her new role as coordinator of the social program. "Mr. Robert," Sophia exclaimed, running to hug him. "Mommy said you might be in trouble for helping us." Robert knelt, looking into the girl's worried eyes. "Sophia, sometimes doing the right thing brings challenges, but that doesn't mean we should stop doing it. Are you going to keep helping us?" Robert looked at Maria, who watched the scene with tears in her eyes. "I'm going to do much more than that," he promised. "I'm going to fight to create a world where no child has to write a resume at 6 years old." But even as he made that promise, Robert knew the toughest battle of his life was just beginning. The board meeting was called for a rainy Friday, as if the weather itself reflected the tension in the air. Robert arrived at the corporate building an hour early, walking the halls he knew so well, wondering if he would still recognize them as his professional home by the end of the day. Margaret greeted him with a sealed envelope. "This arrived this morning, Mr. Sinclair. Express delivery." Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter on paper with colorful drawings on the borders. The handwriting was childish but careful. "Dear Mr. Robert, Mommy said bad people are saying mean things about you for helping us. I want you to know that you are the nicest man I know. If you lose your big job, you can work with me. I will share my school lunch with you every day. With love, Sophia P.S. I drew butterflies for you to remember that people can change and become more beautiful." Robert had to sit down to keep from falling. A 6-year-old child offering to share her school lunch with a millionaire who might be about to lose everything. The purity of that gesture made him cry again, something that was becoming increasingly common since Sophia had entered his life. At 3 p.m., the 5 board members were assembled in the conference room. The atmosphere was glacial, with Richard avoiding Robert's gaze and the others maintaining carefully neutral expressions. "Gentlemen," James Morrison began, "we are here to discuss the recent changes in the leadership of this company." "Changes?" Robert asked. "Or an attempted coup?" "Robert," Morrison said with false patience, "your recent decisions raise legitimate questions about your ability to lead this organization responsibly." "Which decisions specifically?" Richard leaned forward. "Allocating corporate resources to personal projects, canceling important meetings to visit shelters, hiring employees based on sentimentality rather than qualifications." Maria Diaz has 8 years of experience as a nurse and profound knowledge of the community's social needs, Robert replied calmly. Her qualifications are impeccable. But her hiring was motivated by your personal relationship with her daughter, Richard insisted. Robert stood up, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of the city. Do you know what my biggest mistake has been over the last 15 years? He asked. Believing that business success meant isolating myself from the humanity around me. I built an empire, but I lost my soul in the process. He turned to face the board. Sofia Diaz, a 6-year-old child, taught me more about courage and determination. In 15 minutes than I learned in decades of corporate meetings. She showed me that true success isn't measured in accumulated dollars, but in transformed lives. Touching philosophy, Morrison said dryly, but shareholders don't invest in feelings. You're mistaken, Robert retorted. Companies with genuine social responsibility consistently outperform those focused solely on profit. There are studies proving it. And there are studies showing that emotionally unstable CEOs destroy shareholder value, Richard countered. The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Robert knew he had reached the moment of truth. Very well, he said calmly. Let's settle this once and for all. I propose a vote. What kind of vote? Morrison asked. You vote on whether you want my immediate resignation or if you give me 6 months to prove that the social responsibility program can increase both the company's value and its positive impact on the community. Yet, the board members exchanged nervous glances. They hadn't expected Robert to take the initiative. And if we vote for your resignation? Asked one of the younger members. Then I leave today, taking my 40% stake in the company with me, Robert replied. You can continue focusing exclusively on profits. And if we vote for the 6 months? Robert smiled for the first time in the meeting. Then prepare to see this company become a leader not only in financial results, but in social impact. And if I fail, I will resign without contest. The vote was tense. 2 votes for immediate resignation, 2 for the 6 months, and Morrison as the tiebreaker. The man remained silent for long minutes, clearly weighing the political and financial implications of his decision. 6 months, he said finally, but with strict monitoring conditions. Robert nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had bought time, but now he needed to prove that his new philosophy could work in the real world of business. That night, he visited Maria and Sofia with mixed news. I've got 6 months to prove I'm right, he explained, but if I fail... You won't fail, Maria interrupted with conviction, because you're fighting for something bigger than yourself. Sofia, who had overheard the conversation from the kitchen, appeared with 2 glasses of juice. Uncle Robert, I brought juice to celebrate. Celebrate what, little one? That you didn't give up on us, she replied simply, just like I didn't give up when I came to your office. Robert picked Sofia up, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. He wasn't just fighting for his company or even for this specific family. He was fighting for the possibility that the business world could have a soul. Sofia, he said, thank you for teaching me that asking for help isn't weakness. And thank you for teaching me that adults can change too, she replied, hugging him tightly. As he held her, Robert knew that regardless of what happened in the next 6 months, he had already gained something more valuable than all the profits he had accumulated, a real family. 3 months had passed since the board meeting, and Robert had dived headfirst into transforming his company. The social responsibility program, coordinated by Maria, was showing impressive results. 15 families lifted out of vulnerability, 80 children back in school, and partnerships with public hospitals that had already benefited hundreds of people. The financial numbers were also encouraging. The company's change in image had attracted new, socially conscious investors, and contracts with organizations that prioritized corporate responsibility were beginning to appear. Robert felt He was on the right track. It was on a rainy Tuesday that everything fell apart. Margaret entered his office, her face pale, holding a plain envelope. "Mr. Sinclair, this was left at reception for you." The person didn't want to identify themselves. Robert opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside, a handwritten letter in the careful script he had come to recognize. "Dear Robert, when you read this letter, Sophia and I will be gone. Please don't try to find us. I know your intentions are genuine, but I can no longer watch you sacrifice everything you've built for our sake. The pressure you're facing, the attacks in the press, the resistance in your company, it's all because of us. Sophia doesn't understand why we're leaving. She cries, asking for Uncle Robert every day. Lying to my daughter is the hardest thing I've ever done, but I can't let her get attached to a situation that could end at any moment. You gave us something wonderful, hope. But hope becomes cruel when it cannot be sustained. I'd rather leave. Now, with Sophia still believing in happy endings, than wait until circumstances force us out. Use the money you would spend on us to help other families. There are many Sophias out there who need you. Thank you for showing us that there are still good people in the world. With love and gratitude, Maria Diaz." P.S. Sophia left something for you. It's at Mrs. Carmen's Haven. Robert felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. His hands trembled so much he could barely hold the letter. Maria and Sophia were gone, and the pain of loss was as intense as what he'd felt when Emily died. He cancelled all his meetings for the day and drove immediately to the Haven. Mrs. Carmen received him with tear-reddened eyes. "Mr. Sinclair, they left at dawn. Maria said it was for the best, that she didn't want to be a burden to anyone." "Did she leave any clue as to where they went?" "No, sir. But she left this for you." Mrs. Carmen handed him a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing by Sophia, a family of butterflies flying together, with a note written in large, crooked letters. "Uncle Robert, butterflies sometimes need to fly to faraway places, but they always remember who helped them fly. Thank you for teaching me I can be a kid. I love you." Robert had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. The devastating simplicity of Sophia's message completely destroyed him. A 6-year-old child trying to console him even amidst her own suffering. "Mrs. Carmen, are they okay? Do they have money, a place to stay?" "Maria said she had saved enough from the salary you paid her to support themselves for a few months. But after that..." The woman shook her head sadly. Robert spent the next few days in a desperate search. He hired private investigators, checked hotel and inn records, alerted hospitals in several cities, but Maria had disappeared with Sophia as if they had never existed. Their absence became a physical ache. Robert discovered how accustomed he had become to Sophia's visits, her colorful drawings, her innocent questions about butterflies and transformations. His mansion, already empty, now felt like a mausoleum. In the office, his productivity plummeted. Margaret often found him staring out the window, lost in thought. The board members began to murmur again about his emotional instability. Richard appeared in his office on a Friday afternoon. "Robert, I need to be blunt with you. Your obsession with this missing family is affecting the entire company. Investors are worried. Employees are insecure." "They didn't disappear," Robert corrected, his voice tense. "They ran away because they thought they were hurting me." "And weren't they?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. "What do you want, Richard?" "I want you to choose. The company or this desperate search for people who clearly don't want to be found." Robert stared at his partner for long seconds. "And if I choose them? Then you're on your own. The board will vote for your removal next week." After Richard left, Robert was alone with his thoughts. Through the window, he could see children playing in the park across from the building. One of them, a small girl with brown hair, made him jump from his chair for a moment of hope. But it wasn't Sophia. That night, he made a decision that would change everything. If Maria believed he was sacrificing too much for them, then he would prove her wrong. He would prove that some things were more important than money or power. Robert Sinclair was about to make the riskiest bet of his life, a bet where the prize wasn't profit, but the chance to bring back the two people who had become his true family. But first, he needed to find them, and for that, he was willing to sacrifice everything he had built. Robert didn't sleep for 3 consecutive nights. On Monday morning, he called an emergency meeting of the board of directors. When he arrived at the conference room, he found not only the 5 board members, but also lawyers and auditors, a clear indication that the decision to oust him had already been made. "Gentlemen," Robert said, his voice surprisingly calm for someone who was about to lose everything, "I came here to make a proposal." "Robert," Morrison interrupted, "before you say anything, you need to know that we've already decided." "I want to sell my stake in the company," Robert said, cutting him off. The silence that followed was absolute. Richard blinked several times, as if unsure he had heard correctly. "Sell?" he asked. 40% of the company. Why?" Robert sat down calmly, as if discussing the weather. "Because I've discovered there are more important investments than financial return." He placed a folder on the table. "Here is my proposal. I sell my stake for $800 million, 15% below market value. The money will be used to create a permanent social assistance fund, and I resign from all executive positions." The lawyers began to whisper among themselves, but Richard was staring at Robert with a mixture of shock and admiration. "Are you serious? $800 million? Completely serious. But there's one condition." "Which is?" "The social responsibility program continues, with Maria Diaz as its coordinator when she returns." Morrison frowned. "If she returns, you don't even know where she is." "She will return," Robert said with a conviction that surprised even himself. "Because I'm going to show her that some promises are kept regardless of the cost." The meeting lasted for 4 hours. Lawyers verified documents, auditors confirmed numbers, and in the end, Robert Sinclair was no longer the CEO of the company he had built. But for the first time in years, he felt completely free. With the money from the sale, Robert created the Sophia Diaz Foundation, a name he chose carefully. The foundation would buy and renovate Mrs. Carmen's haven, create free schools in underserved communities, and offer comprehensive medical assistance to vulnerable families. "Mrs. Carmen," he said a week later, presenting the documents that made her the lifelong director of the new haven, "this place now belongs to the children who need it." The robust woman wept openly. "Mr. Sinclair, this is too generous, but why the Sophia Diaz Foundation?" "Because a 6-year-old girl taught me that real courage isn't never being afraid, but doing what's right even when you are." The news of the sale and the creation of the foundation spread quickly. Newspapers that once criticized Robert now portrayed him as a visionary in social responsibility, but he didn't care about public opinion. He only cared about one thing: finding Maria and Sophia. It was Margaret who brought the first real lead. "Mr. Sinclair, one of the schools the foundation is going to support, reported a new enrollment, a 6-year-old girl named Sophia Santos." Robert's heart stopped. Santos, Maria, had changed their last name. "Where?" "Hope City, 200 miles from here." "But sir, it could be another Sophia." Robert was already grabbing his car keys, Hope City was small and poor, the kind of place where someone could disappear without a trace. Robert found the school easily, a simple building with colorful posters in the windows. Through the classroom window he saw her. Sophia was sitting in the front row, concentrating on a drawing. Even from the back, Robert would recognize that brown hair anywhere. His heart pounded so hard he had to lean against the wall. The teacher noticed his presence and came out to speak with him. "Can I help you?" "I'm a friend of Sofia Santos's family. May I speak with her?" The teacher hesitated. Her mother said people might come asking for them. She said not to allow contact with strangers. "Please," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion, "just tell her Uncle Robert is here. If she doesn't want to see me, I'll leave." A few minutes later, Robert heard a voice he had desperately longed to hear again. "Uncle Robert!" Sophia ran to him like a small, determined missile, jumping into his arms with such force she nearly knocked him over. "Uncle Robert, I knew you'd find us. I told Mommy you wouldn't give up on us." Robert held Sophia as if she were the most precious thing in the world, tears streaming freely down his face. "Sophia, my little one, I missed you so much." "Mommy missed you too," Sophia whispered in his ear. "She cries at night and thinks I don't see." "Where is she?" "At work. She cleans houses here in town." "But Uncle Robert, why did we have to leave?" "I didn't understand." Robert knelt to Sophia's level, looking into the eyes he had missed so much. "Because your mommy is a very brave person who didn't want me to be sad because of you. But she didn't understand something important." "What?" "That sometimes we need to be a little sad to achieve a much greater happiness." Sophia frowned, trying to understand. "And did you achieve it?" Robert smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. "I'm about to, Sophia, if your mommy lets me." That afternoon, when Maria returned from work to the small house they had rented, she found Sophia drawing at the kitchen table, more animated than she had been in weeks. "Mommy!" Sophia cried. "I have a surprise for you!" It was then that Maria saw Robert sitting on the living room sofa, holding a crumpled piece of paper, Sophia's original resume, which he had kept like a treasure all those months. Maria stopped in the doorway, her expression quickly shifting from shock to confusion, then to a mixture of joy and fear. Robert stood up slowly, still holding Sophia's resume, his hands trembling slightly. "Maria," he said softly, "I didn't come here to pressure you to come back. I came to show you something." "Mommy!" Sophia yelled, running to hug Maria. "Uncle Robert found me! I told you he was smart!" Maria hugged her daughter but didn't take her eyes off Robert. "How did you find us?" "The Sofia Diaz Foundation is supporting Sophia's school when I saw her name on the student list." "The Sofia Diaz Foundation?" Maria interrupted, confused. Robert smiled gently. "Please, sit down. I have a lot to tell you." Over the next 20 minutes, Robert explained everything: the sale of his stake in the company, the creation of the foundation, the renovation of Mrs. Carmen's haven, the schools being built, the medical program being implemented. "You sold your company?" Maria asked, incredulous. 40% of it, enough to fund the foundation for decades. But why? You lost everything you built." "No," Robert interrupted, looking at Sophia, who was drawing quietly on the floor. "I found everything that truly matters." Maria sat down heavily in her chair, trying to process the information. "Robert, you didn't have to do this, not for us." "It wasn't just for you," he said, sitting beside her. "It was for all the families going through what you went through. It was for me too. I discovered that building a financial empire means nothing if you don't have a family to share your achievements with." "A family?" Maria repeated, her voice barely audible. Maria, I know I'm asking a lot, that you have every right to doubt my intentions after everything that's happened, but I want you to know that my commitment to you both no longer depends on money or social standing. It depends only on the love I feel for you both. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Robert, you don't understand. I didn't run away just because of your company. I ran away because I was getting too attached to you and Sophia too, and I couldn't let myself dream of something that might not be real. Why wouldn't it be real? Because men like you don't fall in love with women like me. Because rich men don't adopt poor families. Because happy endings happen in fairy tales, not in real life. Robert knelt before Maria's chair, taking her hands gently. Maria, look at me. In the past few months, you two have taught me more about love, courage, and hope than I learned in 52 years of life. Sophia showed me that asking for help is an act of courage, not weakness. And you showed me that dignity and strength can coexist with vulnerability. Robert, let me finish, he said softly. I'm not offering charity or doing a favor. I'm asking for a chance to be part of your family, not as a benefactor, but as someone who loves you unconditionally. Sophia, who had been listening to the conversation while drawing, approached them. Mommy, can Uncle Robert be our real daddy? I drew us as a family, she said, showing a drawing where 3 figures holding hands smiled under a sky full of butterflies. Maria looked at the drawing, then at Robert, then at her daughter. The 3 people she loved most in the world were there in her small living room, offering her something she hadn't dared to dream of, a complete family. Sophia, she said, her voice choked with emotion, would you like Uncle Robert to live with us? Forever? Sophia asked, her eyes shining. Robert looked at Maria, waiting for her answer. Forever, Maria confirmed, finally allowing herself to believe. Sophia shrieked with joy and jumped into Robert's arms, who also hugged Maria, forming a circle of love that seemed unbreakable. But Robert, Maria said, still nestled in the embrace, are you sure? Your life will change completely. My life has already changed completely, he replied. The day a brave little girl walked into my office with a handwritten resume and taught me that true success is measured in smiles, not dollars. And if people say you've lost everything, Robert smiled, looking around the small house that would now be his home. Then they haven't understood that I've gained everything. That night, while Sophia slept peacefully in her room, Robert and Maria sat on the porch, planning their future. The foundation will help many families, Maria said. But how will it work in practice? You'll coordinate everything. You know people's real needs better than any consultant, and I'll learn from you how to make a real difference. And us? What will our life together be like? Robert took Maria's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. It will be real, Maria, not a fairy tale, but something better, a love story built on honesty, mutual respect, and the commitment to create a better world for Sophia and for all children who need hope. Maria rested her head on Robert's shoulder, finally allowing herself to believe that some stories really can have happy endings. Thank you, she whispered. Why? For not giving up on us, even when we gave up on ourselves. Robert kissed her hair gently. We'll never give up again. We're a family now, and families don't give up on each other. Through Sophia's bedroom window, they could see the little girl sleeping peacefully, clutching her bare chocolate. Beside her bed, the original resume was framed on the wall as a reminder that sometimes miracles come disguised as requests for help. 6 months later, Robert woke to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. It was Saturday morning, and he had learned that Saturdays in his new life were completely different from Saturdays in his previous life. Instead of financial reports and international calls, there were burnt pancakes, colorful drawings, and conversations about butterflies. "Good morning, family," he said, entering the kitchen to find Sophia standing on a chair, trying to help Maria prepare breakfast. "Daddy Robert," Sophia exclaimed. She had started calling him that naturally, and every time he heard those words, Robert's heart filled with a joy he had never imagined possible. "I'm making butterfly-shaped pancakes." Robert looked at the misshapen batter in the pan and smiled. "It's looking perfect, Princess." "Liar," Maria said, laughing and giving him a good morning kiss. "But it's a very sweet lie." The house they had bought together was modest compared to the mansion Robert had sold, but it was filled with something his old house had never had: life. The walls were decorated with Sophia's drawings, family photographs, and certificates from the schools the Sofia Diaz Foundation had inaugurated. After breakfast, the three of them headed to the most important event of the day, the official opening of the Foundation's 5th school. The new, colorful building was located in the heart of a community that, 6 months ago, had no hope of seeing its children access quality education. "Nervous?" Maria asked in the car, noticing Robert was quieter than usual. "A little," he admitted. "I'm still surprised when I see what we've managed to accomplish." "What we've accomplished," Sophia corrected from the back seat. "Because it's teamwork, right, Daddy?" Robert smiled in the rearview mirror. Sophia had become a little ambassador for the foundation, always present at openings, distributing drawings to other children, and explaining that everyone deserves to have a good school. The opening ceremony was emotional. More than 200 people gathered to celebrate: parents, children, teachers, volunteers, and local officials. Robert watched the children running around the new playground, their laughter echoing through the air, and felt a satisfaction that no corporate profit had ever provided. "Mr. Sinclair," said the principal of the new school, "would you like to make a speech?" Robert was about to decline. He still felt uncomfortable being the center of attention when Sophia tugged his sleeve. "Tell them about the resume, Daddy," she whispered. Robert walked to the small, improvised stage, looking out at the sea of hopeful faces before him. "A year ago," he began, his voice gaining strength, "a very special little girl walked into my office with something she called a resume. On that handwritten paper, she didn't list professional experiences or technical qualifications. She listed her ability to endure cold, to care for sick people, to not complain when she was hungry." The audience was completely silent. "That little girl taught me that the true qualification for changing the world isn't found in diplomas or bank accounts. It's in the courage to ask for help when we need it, in the determination to protect those we love, and in the ability to turn hardship into strength." He looked at Sophia, who was smiling proudly beside Maria. "Today, we inaugurate another school because we believe that every child deserves to have their real qualifications recognized, their creativity, their curiosity, their infinite capacity to dream and transform the world." The applause was warm and prolonged, but Robert barely heard it. He was focused on Sophia, who was running towards him with a paper in her hand. "Daddy, I made a new resume," she said, handing him the paper. Robert read it aloud so everyone could hear. Sophia Sinclair Diaz's resume. Age, 7 years old. Qualifications: know how to make sad people happy. I can draw colorful butterflies. I know how to share toys and snacks. I can tell funny stories. I know how to give hugs that heal. I can help other children not be afraid. I know that families of the heart are as real as families by blood current. Job: happiest daughter in the world. Future plans: help Daddy and Mommy make more children happy. Robert's eyes filled with tears as he read. Sophia had changed her last name to include both his and Maria's, symbolizing the complete union of their lives. "This is the most impressive resume I've ever seen," he said, hugging Sophia as the crowd applauded again. Later, at the end of the day, the family was in the foundation's garden, planting a commemorative tree. It was a tradition to plant a tree with each new school opening, symbolizing growth and hope. "Daddy," Sophia said, her small hands helping to steady the sapling in the soil. "Will the butterflies like this tree?" "They will, Princess. And when it grows, many butterflies will come to make their cocoons here, and then they'll fly to new places." "That's right. But they'll always come back to visit the tree that sheltered them." Sophia nodded, satisfied with the explanation. Maria approached, enveloping Robert and Sophia in a group hug. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, noticing Robert's contemplative gaze. "About how a 6-year-old girl managed to save a 52-year-old man," he replied. "And about how sometimes the best deals in life don't involve money." "What was the best deal of your life?" Sophia asked. Robert looked at his wife and daughter, then at the foundation building, where children still played in the courtyard, finally free to just be children. "Trading a life built on numbers for a life built on hugs," he said. "It was the most profitable investment I've ever made." As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Robert Sinclair Diaz watched a butterfly land on the tree they had just planted. For a moment, he thought of Emily, of the nurse who had cared for her, of the brave little girl who had walked into his office, and of the family he had gained by learning to open his heart. Sophia's original resume, now framed on the wall of his new office at the foundation, was no longer just a desperate plea for a job. It was a daily reminder that sometimes miracles come disguised as requests for help, and that true wealth is measured in transformed lives, not accumulated fortunes. Sophia ran inside, yelling that she was going to draw the butterfly they had seen. Maria and Robert stayed in the garden, hand in hand, watching the first stars appear in the sky. "Thank you," Robert whispered. "Why?" "For teaching me that family isn't something you're born into. It's something you choose to build every day." Maria smiled, squeezing his hand. "And thank you for showing me that happy endings aren't just for fairy tales. They're for those who have the courage to write their own story." In the cozy silence of the night, surrounded by the love they had built together, Robert and Maria knew their lives had been transformed forever by the most important resume ever written. Not with professional qualifications, but with the universal language of love and hope.